The Valorian Dominion had ruled the stars for 12,000 years. They were conquerors who had crushed hundreds of species under their boots. They took what they wanted and destroyed anyone who said no. Their empire stretched across 1,000 worlds. They believed nothing in the universe could challenge their power. When their scout ships found Earth, they saw only another easy target. The small blue planet had no shields, no plasma weapons, and no faster-than-light travel. The humans were primitive creatures who still fought each other with chemical explosives and metal projectiles. High Commander Zythex looked at the reports and laughed. This conquest would take less than a day. He was about to make the worst mistake in galactic history. The Valorian fleet arrived in Earth's orbit on a Tuesday morning. 100 massive warships blocked out the sun over every major city. They broadcast a simple message to every screen, every radio, and every phone on the planet. The message said that Earth now belonged to the Valorian Dominion. All humans would surrender immediately or face total destruction. They gave humanity 1 hour to respond. Captain Daniel Morrison stood on the bridge of the aircraft carrier, his valor when the message came. He was a Navy man with 20 years of service behind him. He had gray hair at his temples and calm eyes that had seen too many battles. His crew looked at him with fear on their faces. The alien ships were bigger than anything humanity had ever built. Their weapons could level cities in seconds. Daniel looked at the alien fleet through the window. He thought about his wife and his 2 daughters back home in Virginia. He thought about everything humanity had built over thousands of years. Then he turned to his communications officer. Lieutenant Katie Price was young, only 26 years old. Her hands were shaking as she waited for orders. She expected the captain to tell her to send a surrender message. Every logical calculation said that fighting was pointless. Daniel did not give that order. Instead, he said 5 words that would change history. Tell them to go to hell. Katie stared at him for a moment. Then she smiled and turned to her console. She sent humanity's response to the alien fleet. Earth would not surrender. Not today. Not ever. High Commander Zythex received the message with disbelief. No species had ever refused the Dominion's demands. These primitives were either very brave or very stupid. He decided to teach them a lesson they would never forget. He ordered his ground forces to land and crush the resistance. 10,000 Valorian soldiers dropped from the sky in armored landing craft. They touched down on the beaches of California, expecting to find terrified humans running in panic. The Valorians wore personal energy shields that could stop any laser or plasma weapon. They carried rifles that fired bolts of superheated plasma. They believed they were invincible. They discovered the truth very quickly. Sergeant Maria Santos was waiting on those beaches with her unit. She was 34 years old, a former Army Ranger who had served 3 tours in combat zones. When she saw the alien soldiers stepping out of their ships, she felt no fear. She felt only cold determination. Open fire, she ordered. The Valorians had shields designed to stop energy weapons. They had never encountered bullets before. The high-velocity rounds from human rifles punched through their shields like they were not there. The first wave of alien soldiers fell before they even knew what was happening. The Valorians tried to regroup, but they were not prepared for what came next. Tanks rolled over the hills and opened fire. Artillery shells rained down from miles away. Attack helicopters swept in from the sea, their guns tearing through alien armor. The Valorians had superior technology, but humans had something else. They had thousands of years of experience in the art of killing. Maria led her squad through the chaos. Moving from cover to cover, she watched a Valorian officer trying to rally his troops. She put 3 rounds through his chest before he could finish his sentence. All around her, humans were fighting and dying. But they were taking far more aliens with them. By sunset, the beach was covered with bodies. Of the 10,000 Valorians who had landed, only 300 were still alive. They fled back to their ships, transmitting frantic calls for help to the fleet above. High Commander Zythex watched the footage from the battle in stunned silence. His elite soldiers, equipped with the best technology in the galaxy, had been slaughtered by primitives with projectile weapons. He had underestimated these humans. He would not make that mistake again. He ordered orbital bombardment. The first blast hit Los Angeles. One moment, a city of millions existed. The next moment, there was only fire and ash. San Francisco followed. Then Tokyo, London, Mumbai, Beijing. The Valorians burned city after city, killing billions of humans in hours. Daniel Morrison watched from his ship as the west coast of America disappeared under a wall of fire. He felt tears running down his face, but his voice remained steady. He ordered the Valar to retreat to a safe position and wait for new orders, in a bunker deep beneath the Rocky Mountains. The remaining leaders of humanity gathered. Most of the world's governments had been destroyed in the bombardment. 2 billion people were dead. The survivors were scattered, hiding in bunkers and caves and subway tunnels. General Patricia Cole took command. She was 61 years old, a 4-star general who had spent her entire life serving her country. Her family had been soldiers for generations. Her grandfather had stormed the beaches of Normandy. Her father had fought in Vietnam. Surrender was not a word that existed in her vocabulary. She looked at the faces around her. She saw fear, grief, and rage. These were the last defenders of humanity. The aliens had burned their cities and killed their families. By any logical measure, they had already lost. But Patricia Cole did not believe in logic. She believed in something else. She believed in the human spirit. They think they have beaten us, she said. They think that because they killed billions of us, we will give up and accept slavery. They do not understand what we are. She stood up and looked each person in the eye. We are humanity. We have survived ice ages, plagues, and wars. We have crawled up from the mud and reached for the stars. We do not surrender. We do not give up. And we do not forgive those who hurt our people. The room was silent. Then, one by one, the survivors began to nod. They had lost their homes, their families, and their world. But they had not lost their will to fight. Patricia Cole smiled. It was not a kind smile. They wanted a war, she said. Now they will learn what that means. We are going to make them regret the day they ever heard of Earth. And when this is over, the galaxy will know that humanity is not a species to be conquered. We are the species that conquers. The resistance had begun. The Valorians expected Earth to surrender after the bombardment. They had burned the great cities and killed billions of people. No species in galactic history had ever continued fighting after such losses. The humans would beg for mercy, accept their chains, and become slaves like every other conquered race. The Valorians were about to learn a terrible lesson about humanity. Across the planet, the survivors did not give up. They went underground. They retreated into bunkers built during the Cold War, into subway systems beneath ruined cities, into caves and mines, and any hole in the ground that could hide them from alien sensors. They took their weapons with them. They took their anger, and they began to plan their revenge. Lieutenant Commander Nathan Perry had been stationed aboard a submarine in the Atlantic Ocean when the invasion began. The USS Tempest was an Ohio-class nuclear submarine, one of the most powerful weapons humanity had ever created. It carried enough nuclear missiles to destroy entire continents. When the bombardment began, Nathan received a single order from the bunker in Colorado. Strike back. Nathan gathered his crew and explained the situation. Their families were probably dead. Their country was burning. The enemy controlled the skies and could destroy them at any moment. He asked if anyone wanted to leave before the attack. Not one person moved. The Tempest rose to launch depth in the middle of the night. Nathan stood at the command console, his finger hovering over the launch button. He thought about his mother in Chicago, his brother in New York. They were probably ash now. He pressed the button. 24 nuclear missiles screamed out of the ocean and into the sky. They climbed through the atmosphere on trails of fire, heading for the Valorian fleet in orbit. The aliens detected the launches immediately, but they were not worried. Their ships had shields that could stop any energy weapon in the galaxy. Nuclear weapons were not energy weapons. They were something far more primitive and far more brutal. The first missile struck a Valorian cruiser and detonated. The fireball was brighter than the sun. The explosion ripped through the ship's shields like they were made of paper. The cruiser broke apart in a flash of light, killing 3,000 Valorian sailors in an instant. More missiles found their targets. Cruisers, destroyers, and troop transports vanished in nuclear fire. High Commander Zythex watched from his flagship as ship after ship was destroyed. In 15 minutes, he lost 47 vessels. "What are those weapons?" he demanded. "How are they bypassing our shields?" His tactical officer was pale with shock. "They are nuclear weapons, Commander. Primitive fission and fusion explosives. Our shields are designed to stop directed energy attacks. These weapons release their energy in all directions at once. The shields cannot handle the dispersed blast pattern." Zythex stared at the burning wreckage of his fleet. The primitives had hurt him. They had hurt him badly. But he still had hundreds of ships, and they had only so many nuclear weapons. He ordered the fleet to spread out and continue the occupation. On the ground, things were even worse for the Valorians. Maria Santos had survived the bombardment. She had been in an underground bunker when Los Angeles was destroyed. She emerged 3 days later into a world of ash and fire. Her husband was dead. Her 2 children were dead. Her parents, her friends, everyone she had ever loved was gone. She should have collapsed in grief. Instead, she felt something cold and hard settle into her chest. It was hate, pure and simple, and she would use that hate as a weapon. Maria gathered survivors and formed a resistance cell. They numbered only 20 people at first, armed with rifles and pistols and whatever explosives they could make from household chemicals. It was nothing compared to the alien technology, but it was enough. They struck at night. They hit supply convoys moving through ruined cities. They ambushed patrols and disappeared into the tunnels before reinforcements could arrive. They captured alien weapons and learned to use them. And they killed every Valorian they could find. The aliens could not understand what was happening. They had conquered hundreds of species, and none of them had ever fought like this. Civilized races surrendered when they were beaten. They accepted their fate and served their new masters. These humans refused to accept defeat. Maria led her cell through the ruins of Chicago on a cold winter night. They had information about a Valorian officer who was using a destroyed hospital as his headquarters. He had personally ordered the execution of 100 human prisoners. Maria intended to make him pay. They moved through the shadows like ghosts. The Valorians had sensors and technology that should have detected them. But humans had been hunting in the dark for 1,000,000 years. They knew how to move without being seen. They knew how to kill without warning. Maria found the officer in what had been the emergency room. He was eating dinner, surrounded by guards. He thought he was safe. He was wrong. The attack lasted 30 seconds. Maria and her people came through the doors and windows at the same time. They shot the guards before they could raise their weapons. The officer tried to reach his plasma rifle, but Maria was faster. She put her gun against his head. "You killed human prisoners," she said. "Children. Old people. People who had done nothing wrong." The officer tried to speak, to explain, to beg. Maria did not let him finish. "My children were 5 and 7 years old," she said. "This is for them." She pulled the trigger. All across Earth, scenes like this were repeated every night. Resistance cells struck at the occupiers with fury and cunning. They blew up ammunition dumps and assassinated officers. They poisoned water supplies and sabotaged vehicles. They made the Valorians pay for every inch of ground they tried to hold. High Commander. Zythex reviewed the casualty reports with growing horror. He was losing hundreds of soldiers every week to these attacks. His troops were afraid to leave their bases. They jumped at shadows and shot at nothing. The primitives were inside their heads, and no amount of superior technology could change that. "We should leave this planet," his advisor suggested. "The cost of occupation is too high." Zythex shook his head. The Valorian Dominion had never retreated from a conquest. If they left Earth without victory, every species in the galaxy would see their weakness. Other races might get ideas about rebellion. "No," he said. "We will break them. However long it takes, we will break them." But deep in his heart, Zythex was beginning to wonder if that was possible. These humans were not like any enemy he had ever faced. They did not fight for territory or resources. They fought for revenge. They fought because they hated. And hatred, he was learning, was a weapon more powerful than any plasma rifle in the bunker beneath the Rocky Mountains. General Cole received reports from resistant cells around the world. The news was good. The Valorians were bleeding. They were scared. They were starting to make mistakes. This is only the beginning, she told her commanders. We have hurt them, but we have not beaten them. To do that, we need to take the fight to space. We need ships of our own. Her chief scientist, a young man named Samuel Green, stepped forward. He had been working day and night on captured Valorian technology. General, he said, I think I have found a way. The next phase of the war was about to begin. 2 years had passed since the invasion began. The world had changed in ways that no one could have imagined. The great cities were gone, replaced by fields of ash and twisted metal. Billions of people had died. But humanity had not broken. If anything, the survivors had become harder, stronger, and more dangerous than ever before. Dr. Samuel Green had spent those 2 years in a secret laboratory beneath the Nevada desert. Before the invasion, he had been a physics professor at MIT, teaching students about quantum mechanics and theoretical physics. Now he led a team of scientists working to unlock the secrets of alien technology. They had captured pieces of Valorian ships during the resistance attacks. Engine parts, weapon systems, computer cores. Samuel and his team had taken them apart piece by piece, studying every component until they understood how it worked. It was like trying to reverse engineer a jet fighter using only stone tools, but they had no choice. Humanity needed to reach the stars, or they would die on Earth. The breakthrough came on a cold night in December. Samuel was staring at a fragment of an alien engine when he finally understood the principle behind faster-than-light travel. It was not magic or science fiction. It was a manipulation of space itself, bending the fabric of reality to create a tunnel between 2 points. The math was complex, but the concept was simple. He ran to the communication center and sent an encrypted message to General Cole. 2 words. We did it. Building the first human starship was the greatest engineering challenge in history. They had to do it in secret, underground, using whatever materials they could scavenge from the ruined world. Thousands of people worked on the project, welding metal and laying wires in tunnels that stretched for miles beneath the Arizona desert. Admiral Christina Blake supervised the construction. She had commanded aircraft carrier groups before the invasion, but those days seemed like ancient history now. Her gray hair was tied back in a practical ponytail, and her eyes held a fire that never dimmed. She had lost her husband and son. In the bombardment of San Diego, this ship was her memorial to them. They called it the Retribution. It was ugly by alien standards, a brutal wedge of steel and captured technology. It had none of the graceful curves of Valorian vessels, but it was deadly. Human engineers had mounted railguns along its spine, weapons that fired metal projectiles at a fraction of the speed of light. They had installed nuclear missile launchers and point defense systems, and at its heart, a faster-than-light drive that could carry it across the galaxy. The day of the launch arrived. Christina stood on the bridge, surrounded by a crew of volunteers who knew they might never return. They had all lost someone to the Valorians. They had all signed up for the same reason: revenge. "Engine room report," Christina said. Lieutenant Kevin Park's voice came through the speakers. He was the chief engineer, a young man who had learned spacecraft engineering from captured alien manuals. "Engine is online, Admiral. FTL drive is charged and ready." Christina looked at her crew. They were scared. She could see it in their eyes. But they were also determined. They were humanity's first astronauts, and they were going to make history. "Launch," she ordered. The Retribution rose from the desert floor on pillars of fire. The earth shook as the massive ship climbed into the sky, accelerating faster than any human vehicle had ever moved. Valorian patrol ships detected the launch and moved to intercept, but they were too slow. The human ship punched through the atmosphere and into the cold darkness of space. Christina watched through the forward viewport as Earth fell away below them. She could see the scars of the bombardment from orbit, the dark patches where cities had once stood. 2 billion graves scattered across the planet's surface. She made a silent promise to the dead. Their sacrifice would not be in vain. Set course for the Valorian home system, she said. Maximum FTL speed. The drive engaged with a sound like thunder. Space itself seemed to twist and stretch around the ship. Then, with a flash of light, the Retribution vanished from Earth orbit. It reappeared 6 hours later in the heart of Valorian space. High Commander Zythex was eating dinner with the Valorian High Council when the alarms began to sound. A human ship had somehow traveled across the galaxy and entered their home system. It was impossible. The primitives had no faster-than-light technology. They had no starships. They were supposed to be trapped on their dying world, waiting to be crushed. But the sensors did not lie. A single human vessel hung in space above Valoria, the jewel of the Dominion. It was small and primitive compared to Valorian warships, but it was there, and that meant everything had changed. Christina opened a communication channel. She knew the Valorians would be listening. She wanted them to hear every word. This is Admiral Christina Blake of the human vessel Retribution. 2 years ago, you came to our world. You killed our families. You burned our cities. You thought we were weak. You thought we would surrender? She paused, letting the words sink in. You were wrong. We have learned your technology. We have built our own ships. And now, we are coming for you. Not to conquer. Not to enslave. We are coming to destroy you completely. Every ship, every station, every world that flies your flag, we will not stop until the Valorian Dominion is nothing but ash and memory. The Valorian fleet was scrambling to intercept, but Christina was not interested in fighting today. This was a message, nothing more. She ordered the ship to jump back to Earth before the enemy could engage. The Retribution vanished in a flash of light, leaving the Valorians staring at empty space high. Commander Zythex sat in silence as his advisors argued about what had happened. Some wanted to increase the occupation forces on Earth. Others wanted to negotiate, to offer peace terms before things got worse. But Zythex knew that none of that would matter. He had seen the look in the human admiral's eyes through the video transmission. It was not the look of a warrior seeking victory. It was the look of a predator that had found its prey. The humans were not fighting a war anymore. They were conducting a hunt, and the Valorian Dominion was the target. On Earth, news of the mission spread through the resistance networks. For the first time in 2 years, people felt something other than fear and grief. They felt hope. Humanity had reached the stars. They had shown the enemy that they could strike anywhere, at any time. The war was not over, but the tide was beginning to turn. General Cole addressed the surviving leaders via encrypted broadcast. This is only the beginning, she said. The Retribution has proven that we can build ships and reach their worlds. Now we must build more. We must create a fleet that can match theirs. It will take years. It will cost lives. But when we are done, we will take everything from them, just as they took everything from us. In factories hidden beneath mountains and deserts, construction began on new ships. Humans who had been farmers and teachers and office workers learned to weld starship hulls and program targeting computers. They worked around the clock, driven by a purpose that burned brighter than any star. The Valorians had thought they were conquering a primitive species. They were about to discover that they had awakened something far more dangerous. Humanity was learning to fly, and when they mastered the sky, they would bring their war to every corner of the galaxy. The hunters were becoming the hunted. 5 years had passed since. First Valorian ships appeared in Earth's sky. The world that existed before the invasion was gone forever. But something new had risen from the ashes. Something that the galaxy had never seen before. Humanity had built a fleet. It was not large by Valorian standards. 37 warships against an empire that controlled thousands of vessels. But these ships were crewed by humans who had grown up in a world of war. They had lost everything, and they had nothing left to fear. They were the most dangerous soldiers the universe had ever produced. Captain Ryan Mitchell stood on the bridge of the destroyer. Vengeanson watched the stars through the forward viewport. He was 28 years old, born just 3 weeks before the invasion began. He had never known a world at peace. War was the only life he understood. He was very good at it. His first memory was hiding in a basement while alien soldiers searched the streets above. His mother had covered his mouth to keep him from crying. He remembered the fear in her eyes, the way her hands shook as she held him close. She had died 3 years later, killed by a Valorian patrol while scavenging for food. Ryan had joined the resistance at 14. By 16, he was leading combat missions against occupation forces. By 20, he was commanding a ship. Now he led a squadron of 5 destroyers, and he had killed more Valorians than he could count. Enemy fleet detected, his sensor officer reported. 43 warships. They are moving to intercept. Ryan studied the tactical display. The Valorians outnumbered his force almost 9-1. Any sane commander would retreat and wait for reinforcements. But Ryan was not a sane commander. He was a child of the invasion, and sanity had never been part of his training. "All ships, attack formation Omega," he ordered. "We go straight through the middle." The human fleet did not fight like civilized species. They did not form neat lines and exchange fire at long range. They charged directly at the enemy, accepting casualties in exchange for close-range kills. Their railguns punched through Valorian shields at point-blank range. Their nuclear missiles detonated against enemy hulls before the aliens could shoot them down. And when a ship was too damaged to fight, the crew would set the reactor to overload and ram the nearest enemy vessel. The Battle of Corax Prime was chaos and fire. Human ships dove through the Valorian formation, guns blazing in all directions. Ryan watched as the destroyer Fury took a direct hit to its engine section. Instead of trying to escape, Captain Linda Hayes turned her dying ship toward a Valorian cruiser and accelerated to maximum speed. "Give them hell." "Linda," Ryan whispered. The Fury struck the cruiser amidships, and both ships vanished in a ball of nuclear fire. All across the battle, human crews fought with a desperation that bordered on madness. They did not retreat. They did not surrender. They killed until they could not kill anymore. And then they took as many enemies with them as possible. The Valorians had never faced anything like this. Their tactics were designed for enemies who valued their own lives. They did not know how to fight opponents who seemed to welcome death. For the first time in 12,000 years of conquest, the Valorian commanders felt fear. The battle lasted for hours. When it ended, the Valorian fleet was destroyed. All 43 ships were either burning wreckage or drifting hulks. Humanity had lost 11 vessels, but they had won a victory that would echo across the galaxy. On Earth, the occupation was collapsing. Maria Santos had spent 5 years building her resistance network into an army. What had started as 20 fighters hiding in Chicago's ruins was now a force of 50,000 soldiers spread across North America. They had captured Valorian weapons factories and learned to manufacture their own plasma rifles. They had taken control of underground bunkers and turned them into military bases. Now they were ready for the final assault. General Cole, 71 years old but still sharp as a blade, commanded the operation from a mobile headquarters. The target was the Valorian occupation headquarters in the ruins of Berlin. It was the most heavily defended position on Earth, protected by energy shields and thousands of alien soldiers. Attacking it was suicide, but humanity had learned that sometimes suicide was victory. The assault began at dawn. 200,000 human fighters emerged from tunnels, basements, and hidden positions all across Europe. They struck from every direction at once, overwhelming the Valorian defenses through sheer numbers and ferocity. Maria led the main assault force. She was 40 years old now, her face lined with scars and her eyes hard as stone. She had killed more Valorians than anyone else in the resistance, and she intended to add to that number today. "Forward," she shouted, raising her plasma rifle. "For Earth, for everyone we lost." Her soldiers charged across the ruined streets, stepping over the bodies of fallen comrades and enemies alike. The Valorians fought back with everything they had, but they were outnumbered and outmatched. Human soldiers reached the shield generators and planted explosives. The barriers fell, and the final wave poured into the headquarters complex. The battle lasted 3 days. When it ended, not a single Valorian remained alive. General Cole walked through the ruins of the enemy headquarters, stepping over alien bodies. She found the Valorian commander in what had been his office, dead by his own hand. He had chosen suicide over capture. She understood. She would have done the same in his position. "Earth is free," she said quietly. The words spread across the planet within hours. After 5 years of occupation, humanity had driven the invaders from their world. In bunkers and tunnels and ruins and refugee camps, people wept with joy. They had survived the worst thing that had ever happened to their species, and they had won. But General Cole knew that this was not the end. It was barely the beginning. She gathered her commanders for a final briefing. Admiral Blake attended via video link from her flagship, now commanding a fleet of 60 vessels. Captain Mitchell was there too, his face still showing the exhaustion of battle. Maria Santos stood in the corner, cleaning her rifle and listening. "The Valorians will not give up," Cole said. "They cannot. If they let us defeat them, every species they have conquered will see their weakness. Rebellions will spread across their empire. They have to destroy us now or lose everything." She paused, letting the implication sink in. "That means we have to destroy them first. Not just drive them away, not just make peace. We have to end the Valorian dominion completely. Every ship, every world, every soldier who wears their uniform." Admiral Blake nodded. "My fleet is ready. The shipyards are producing 3 new vessels every month. In another 5 years, we will have the strength to attack their home system." Maria Santos spoke for the first time. Her voice was cold and flat, without emotion. "I have been killing Valorians for 5 years," she said. "I will kill them for 5 more, or 50 more, however long it takes. They burned my world. They killed my children. I will not stop until their entire species is ash." General Cole looked at her soldiers. She saw the same determination in every face. They were not fighting for peace or prosperity. They were fighting for revenge. And that made them the most dangerous enemy the galaxy had ever seen. "Then we are agreed," she said. "This war ends only one way, with the complete destruction of our enemy." The final phase of the war was about to begin. 10 years had passed since the first Valorian ship entered Earth's atmosphere. 10 years of war, death, and suffering on a scale that humanity had never imagined. But the human race had not been destroyed. Instead, it had been transformed into something new. Something terrible. Admiral Christina Blake stood on the bridge of the dreadnought Extinction and watched as her fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel. 217 warships, each one crewed by humans who had lost everything to the Valorian invasion. They had traveled across the galaxy for this moment. The moment of final reckoning. Before them hung Valoria, the jewel of the Dominion. It was a beautiful world, covered in shining cities and sparkling oceans. 12 billion Valorians lived on its surface. They had ruled the galaxy for 12,000 years from this planet. They believed they were the greatest species in existence. They were about to learn otherwise. Christina was 68 years old now. Her hair was white, and her face was lined with decades of grief and rage. She had commanded the first human starship to reach Valorian space. She had watched friends and crew members die in battle after battle. She had lost everything except one thing: her burning desire to see the Valorian Dominion destroyed. "Enemy fleet detected," her tactical officer reported. 512 warships. "They are forming a defensive line." Christina nodded. The Valorians had gathered every ship they could find to defend their homeworld. They outnumbered the human fleet more than 2 to 1. By any reasonable calculation, they should win this battle. But the Valorians had learned that reasonable calculations did not apply to humans. High Commander Scythex stood on the bridge of his flagship and watched the human fleet approach. He was old now, his scales faded and his eyes tired. He had spent 10 years fighting these impossible creatures, and he had failed to stop them at every turn. He remembered the day the invasion began. He had laughed at the idea of primitive humans posing a threat to the Dominion. Now he watched their fleet advance toward his homeworld, and he felt only despair. They will not negotiate, his advisor said quietly. We have tried. They do not want peace. Zithix knew this. He had sent diplomats, offered surrender terms, promised reparations. The humans had rejected every offer. They did not want what they had lost returned to them. They wanted revenge. Pure and complete. Then we fight, Zithix said, and we pray that our gods are merciful. The Battle of Valoria was the largest naval engagement in galactic history. 500 Valorian ships against 200 human vessels. It should have been a massacre, it was. But not the kind the Valorians expected. Captain Ryan Mitchell led the first wave of the attack. His destroyer, now named Vengeance II, after his original ship was destroyed 3 years earlier, it dove straight into the heart of the enemy formation. His crew fired railguns and missiles in every direction. Tearing through Valorian ships like a wolf through sheep? Target that cruiser, Ryan ordered, pointing at a massive Valorian vessel trying to flank them. All forward guns. The railgun spoke, and the cruiser's shields collapsed under the impact. A nuclear missile followed, detonating inside the ship's hull. The cruiser broke apart in a ball of fire, killing 5,000 Valorian sailors in an instant. All across the battle, human ships fought with the same terrible efficiency. They had been fighting for 10 years, and every captain, every crew member, knew exactly what they were doing. They had practiced these tactics in dozens of battles. They had paid for this knowledge in blood. The Valorians fought bravely. But they were not prepared for the fury of the human assault. Their commanders expected enemies who would retreat when damaged, who would surrender when victory seemed impossible. Instead, they faced ships that charged forward even as they burned. Crews that fought until their last breath. When a human destroyer lost its weapons, its captain rammed a Valorian battleship. When a cruiser ran out of missiles, its crew boarded an enemy vessel and fought hand-to-hand through its corridors. When Admiral Blake's flagship took critical damage to its engine section, she simply ordered the ship to continue firing until it could not fire anymore. The battle lasted 12 hours. When it ended, the Valorian fleet was gone. Not defeated, not scattered, but completely destroyed. Every single ship either floated as burning wreckage or had been reduced to expanding clouds of debris. Humanity had lost 89 vessels. Nearly half their fleet, but they had one. Admiral Blake looked down at Valoria through her damaged viewport. The planet hung below her, peaceful and beautiful. 12 billion lives waited on its surface. Not knowing that their fate had already been decided, she opened a channel to the planet's surface. This is Admiral Christina Blake of the human fleet. 10 years ago, you came to our world. You killed 2 billion of our people. You burned our cities. You tried to make us slaves. Her voice was calm, almost gentle. That somehow made it worse. We asked for nothing from you. We sent no ships to your worlds. We posed no threat to your empire. And you attacked us anyway. You murdered our children. You destroyed everything we had built over thousands of years. She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice was ice. Now, you will learn what that mistake costs. We are not here to conquer you. We are not here to make you slaves. We are here to ensure that the Valorian Dominion never threatens anyone again. She cut the channel and turned to her weapons officer. Begin bombardment. Leave nothing standing. The human fleet opened fire. Nuclear missiles and railgun rounds rained down on the planet below. Cities that had stood for thousands of years vanished in seconds. The oceans boiled. The atmosphere burned. 12 billion Valorians died as their world was reduced to a ball of glass and ash when it was over. Christina Blake sat alone in her quarters and wept. She wept for the people of Valoria who had died for the crimes of their leaders. She wept for the people of Earth who would never return no matter how many enemies she killed. She wept for herself for the person she had been before the war. A person who would have been horrified by what she had just done, but she did not regret it. She could not afford to regret it. Because the galaxy was watching. It needed to understand what humanity had become. Within weeks, news of Valoria's destruction spread across the galaxy. Other species, some who had been conquered by the Dominion centuries ago, watched in shock and awe. The empire that had ruled them for so long was gone, wiped out by a species that had not even known the stars existed a decade earlier. Ambassadors came to Earth, traveling through the ruins of human cities to meet with the new leaders of the planet. They wanted to understand these creatures who had done the impossible. They wanted to make sure that humanity would not come for them next. Admiral Ryan Mitchell, now 40 years old and the commander of the human fleet, met with the first delegation. They were small creatures, almost like insects, from a species that had served the Valorians for 1,000 years. "We come in peace," the ambassador said carefully. "We have no quarrel with humanity." Ryan studied the creature for a long moment. He remembered what he had been like before the war, a child, innocent and hopeful. That person was gone, killed by years of fighting and loss. But he could still remember what peace felt like. "We do not seek war," he said finally. "We never did. The Valorians brought war to us, and we finished it. That is all." The ambassador seemed to relax slightly. "Then you will not attack our worlds." "No. As long as no one attacks us, we will leave the galaxy in peace." Ryan paused, and his voice hardened. "But remember this. We did not start the fight with the Valorians. They did, and look at what happened to them. The next species that threatens humanity will suffer the same fate. We do not forgive. We do not forget. And we do not lose." The ambassador nodded quickly and backed away. It had received the message loud and clear. Across the galaxy, other species received the same warning. The small blue planet called Earth was home to the deadliest creatures the universe had ever seen. They were pack hunters who held grudges for generations. They had been content to stay on their world and dream about the stars. Then the Valorians had attacked them. Now humanity was among the stars, and they would never be victims again. On Earth, the survivors began to rebuild. They cleared the ruins of their cities and planted new gardens in the ashes of the old. They raised children who would never know the fear of alien occupation. They created monuments to the dead and wrote history books about the war. And every night, they looked up at the stars and remembered. They remembered the friends they had lost, the families they had buried, the world that had been destroyed. They remembered the 10 years of fighting that had forged them into something new. They were humanity. They had survived everything the universe could throw at them. And if anyone ever threatened tea,